Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to a brand new video. And now it feels like it's been a while since we've just got to kind of sit down and chat and craft. And today I'm going to pull out one of Altenew's new stamp sets to use and show a really fun stamp kissing technique as we go along. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so I'm going to use this marbled bloom stamp set to do a little bit of stamp layering, and then to add some texture in with stamp kissing, I'm going to use the Halftone circle stamp set from Altenew, but you could also use like this really cool tie-dye one that they just came out with called tie-dye MOTIFS. Just anything with some really fun texture like these is going to give a great impression in your stamp. So for this stamp, it looks like I'm going to have to pull out the largest halftone circle to give texture over all of it, so I'll peel that one out. Alright, so I've pulled out my MISTI and a piece of my Simon Hurley Create Stark White cardstock, and then I'm going to grab in my flower image, and the reason why I'm doing it in my MISTI is because I might need to stamp it twice, and I just want to kind of be safe when I place this down. Then I'm just going to grab one of my Simon Hurley acrylic blocks and do the same thing with this larger halftone pattern, and I love these blocks because they're the perfect thickness, and they're really great to transfer those images down. Now there's definitely a couple ways you could do this, but I'm going to show you one in today's video, and maybe we'll switch it off with the different layers to see what gives the best result. But for this first one, I'm going to start off with a little bit of piggyback ink, and I'm going to go in. This is going to be the lightest layer, the most solid one is going to be the lightest. So I'll go in here, ink that up, and stamp it down. And I actually brought this tool. This one's called the Debbie. I know there's a lot of different tools on the market right now being made like this, but this one's really nice because it's this handle and it's got a really great grip to it. I'll link to a couple of different tools like this down below, but I've liked this one. Alright, so I'm going to go in and ink that up again. I just want it to be a little tiny bit darker than it turned out the first time. So we'll again go in, give it some good pressure, and this just helps to kind of transfer the ink down really nicely and not have to move your fingers across. Alright, so I've got the desired color now, and that looks great. Now I'm going to go in and do the same thing, but we're going to go in with a little bit of Rosy Cheeks ink, and we'll ink up our solid stamp one more time. So this is just like one step above piggyback. And then I'm going to grab my halftone image, and I'm going to stamp that right into my stamp there. You can see it kind of transfer. We'll give a little wiggle there to make sure that it kind of lifts off that ink. And what this is going to do is it's going to lift off ink in that pattern. So then when I stamp this down, it'll add a little bit of texture to the stamping, which is super cool. So that's one thing I love about stamp kissing. You get this beautiful like dotted texture in there then. And there's a lot of things you could kiss into that image. Alright, so I pulled out the second layer with more details in. We're going to line it up with our image. This is why I like the MISTI, because I can make sure that it's easily aligned, and then when I'm stamping I don't have the pressure to line it up. Alright, for this next layer I'm going to go in and ink it up with a bit of Prom Queen, which is my next darkest pink. And here I'm going to go in with that same halftone stamp and pick it up. So this time, instead of doing two separate ink colors and two separate layers, I'm just going to do it in one since we've got our base laid down. So we'll go in here, give this good pressure, and there we go. That's our second layer, and you can see that dotted texture really shows up in some of those areas to give a really cool result. So here we're going to go in with a little bit of Bee Sting, which is one of my reds now. We're moving into that family, and I want to stamp it once before I go in with the pattern, just because I want to lay down a little bit of color since we've only had pink before this. And then we'll bring in the halftone stamp. And if you put it more towards the side, you'll get like a lighter halftone. So it all just depends on how you want it. Grabbing the last layer, and for this one I'm going to use a little bit of Game Over, which is my darkest and deepest red color. And of course we could go in with the stamp kissing one more time if we want to. On these smaller layers it's not as noticeable, but we'll go in and stamp that down anyway to give the last and final shading, and that is just stunning. So I love that fun texture in there, but even without it, this image is just beautiful. I've lined up the inside, and I'm going to use a little bit of Over the Moon for this. So we'll stamp it down, and we'll actually do that twice just to get a nice dark color. Now I've lined up the second layer of the center, and I'm going to add a little bit of Prom Queen right onto my halftone background, and then I'll go in with a little bit of Slippery When Wet onto the stamp. So we're going to mix a little bit of yellow and pink, and if I just go in with the ink that I've or area that I've inked up of that stamp, it's going to transfer a little bit of pink to that center, and then you'll get texture in a different color. So if you look there, you can see a little bit of that pink texture inside, which is so fun. So you can do that with the flower too, if you want more of a two-toned look. All right, so I've added all of the different leaves down at once, so we can do those together. We'll go in and ink them all up. And here, instead of getting a base color, I'm gonna first wipe off that pink that we did. You wanna make sure to clean that off in between all of the different stampings. And here we'll go in and lift off some of the color. And it's not big enough to cover the whole thing, so we'll just do it in two separate kind of stampings and then stamp that down. You can just see that awesome texture all throughout. I love that. And it just gives kind of a subtle texture, but I like the little bit of interest that it adds to the stamp. And this is another reason why I like the MISTI too, because if you're doing groupings of leaves or things like that where you want to stamp down a lot of them, I'm able to just go in and pick out all the different layers of the things that are going to be the same color, and that's going to save me a bunch of time when I'm stamping. All right, I've lined up the third layer, and I'm going to use a little bit of fake plants for this one, and I don't even feel the need to really go in with my halftone pattern because this one is just so tiny and detailed, and we can just go in a few times to stamp it down with my MISTI. All right, so then I'm just going to line up all of the coordinating dies along with it so we can cut these out and add a little bit of mint tape down, and I'll run these right through my die cutting machine. All right, so here are our images. I just love that fun little bit of texture that we were able to add in there with the halftone circles. Of course, it's kind of subtle, but I really enjoy the little bit of extra detail that that does add to the image. I want to create a really fun background using the exact same technique, so I pulled out my gel plate and we're going to be doing that right now. Okay, so I've grabbed a couple of different colors. I'm going to start off with some sidewalk chalk at the top. We'll lay that color down. And then I'll just kind of move down and go throughout with this blend. So moving into clear skies now. And I'm gonna use ink pads instead of re-inkers here because I want there to be less ink and for the ink to be able to be removed a little bit easier. So then I'll go in with a little bit of Psych. And to smooth this out, I just want to easily brayer out some of these colors to kind of blend them together in between. So we'll just brayer them pretty quickly to get rid of any harsh lines and anything like that. So then I'm going to go in with these stamps. Now these ones are from the tie-dye stamp set from Altenew that I shared at the beginning. And I'm just going to go around here. And like I said, using these ink pads gives less ink onto the surface rather than a re-inker. And you're easily able to kind of get a little bit more texture in your background. So I'm just going to go through and use a couple of the different sizes of the tie-dye pattern and just stamp them down into our background. And then give some good pressure all over to make sure that everything transfers nice and easily. We'll peel that off, and there you go. So once that's all done, here is what that background looks like. It just gives a little bit of texture all over the place and removes some of that color off of the background to create this stunning effect. All right, so for the background of today's card, I'm just gonna use a little bit of clear skies to create kind of a circle of this sky blue color right in the center of my card, and layer up a lot of that color. Now I love these domed foam blending tools for this exact reason. I want the color to be nice and concentrated and dark so that I can, create a fun technique with this. But I also want the edges to be blended out really well, and that's why I love these so much because they're super easily able to do that. So once I've got all of that blended out, I'm then going to go in with these tie-dye motif stamps from Altenew, and I want to use these to create kind of a fun texture in the background. So I'll just go in and mist them down, and then we'll go in and stamp, and just with a little bit of water, these can create some really stunning effects. My ink is going to react with that water, and it's going to kind of lift it off of the surface there to create a fun texture in the background. So almost like we did earlier with the stamp kissing, this is just going to remove some color and create a really fun texture on the surface. Now I just want to have some fun and play around with this, so I'm going to take that image again and use a little bit of that clear skies, which is the same color that we used to blend, and I'm just going to rotate it just a little bit so that it's a little bit off of the water stamping that we did, and that's just going to create a fun little texture there in the background, a little bit more interest with color, and it'll almost finish off the tie-dye pattern. All right, so to add all this down, I'm going to place that where I want it, and I'm going to use that kind of as the bloom for the upper flower here. So we'll lay that down with a little bit of foam tape, and then this I'm going to add with a little bit of tape runner adhesive, more flat right onto the card. So for the leaf, I've added a little bit of tape runner to the bottom and then a little bit of foam tape to the end to make sure that it pops up and gives a little bit of dimension. And I'll do the same thing with the leaf on the other side. All right, and then I'm just going to take the Hello stamp, and this one is from the Halftone Circles stamp set, and just stamp it down onto my cardstock. And I'm just going to go in and cut this out with my scissors because I'm going to put it on top, and I don't want it to be a rectangle. I don't want it to take up too much room. So by going in and fussy cutting it out with your scissors, it allows you a little bit more room on your card for the design to stand out. I'm using these Fiskars Spring Assist scissors. Many of you guys know that they're my favorite, and I finally found a great source for them, so I'll link them down below in the description. I just like them because they're really easy on your hands because they spring back out, so you'll never get tired, and it also helps to get into all of those little details. Alright, so there is today's finished card. I love that easy stamp kissing technique that we were able to do on top of the flower, and then even a little bit in the background that's slightly covered up, but I like that you can kind of see some of that detail popping out here and there. Thank you guys so much for taking a little bit of time out of your day to craft with me. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you guys did as well. If you did, please give this video a big thumbs up, and be sure to hit that subscribe button down below so you never miss another card making and crafting video like this one from me. Alright guys, I'll see you very soon. Have a great day. Bye!